Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss the 2021 version of Dune. Not the David Lynch one, not the TV miniseries one, but the 2021 version starring Timothy Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, Stellan Skarsgård, Dave Bautista, Stephen McKinley Henderson, Zendaya, Cheng Chen, Sharon Duncan Brewster, Charlotte Rampling, Jason Momoa, and Javier Bardem, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Now, I have seen this once in the IMAX showing and twice on HBO Max, and I just watched it recently on my 4K Blu ray, and we'll see why I like it that much. Let's get into the movie. The movie begins with a text I don't think it makes sense for the movie, but maybe that it does. But if so, somebody tell me in the bottom. As it says something like this: Dreams are messages from the deep, which was pretty random for sure, and we get on with the Warner Brothers and Legendary logos, which felt very random for the start of this movie, and we get to the deserty planet called Arrakis, as being narrated by Shawnee, played by Zendaya, as it was once a peaceful planet until some creatures led by Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, I don't know if I'm saying that right, played by Stellan Skarsgård, take over the planet, and some troops come in to fight the creatures. And as a narration, it was sort of hard to understand if you haven't read the book, like I haven't read it myself. Let me see if I'm saying this right. Artides, something like that, played by Timothy Chalamet, wakes up from dreaming of Chani while in his home world of Caliban, and his mother, Lady Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, teaches Paul how to use his devilish voice, as we get intense shots of Paul using his voice to give him the water, which felt very witchcraft, and the scene did feel intense, but at the same time I was thinking, what the hell is going on in that scene, as he continues to have dreams of Chani on the planet Arrakis. And can I just say it for now, this movie is shot tremendously, as it looks fantastic on the IMAX screen. We get Paul's father, Duke Leto, played by Oscar Isaac, as well as Gurney Halleck, played by Josh Brolin, as well as Thurfer Hawat, I don't know if I'm saying that right, and they get some visitors from Arrakis to get to a house Atreides. And this movie's cinematography is magnificent, as this should win the Best Cinematography Award at the Oscars this year, as director Denis Villeneuve does a fantastic job with making his vision of the book come to life, just like he did with, what's that movie? Blade Runner 2049. Paul talks with Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, or as I like to call him, Jason Aquaman Whore Momoa, don't repeat that please, about the dream he has about Shawnee, as I get the impression he's Paul's best friend, and at least he's better here than in the Justice League series, where he doesn't say, "My man," here, as I'm giving this movie the first 30 minutes to know what the story is, as Paul wants to fight in Arrakis with Duncan, but Duke says no, as he needs Paul by his side to not face political danger while in the graveyard in the middle of the mountain. And Duke gives Paul advice about how he's called the lead, not to beg for it. And next thing you know, Paul is being trained by Gurney with some blades, as they have some kind of shield power that doesn't hurt them until they eventually outnumbered. As Paul is moody, and during the scene, as Timothy Chalamet does a good job portraying the character of Paul, and Giedi Prime, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Beast Robin Harkonnen, played by Dave Bautista, enters as Lord Baron, and the scene has a little to offer, as that could have been cut out of this movie. This is a pretty long movie at 2 hours and 35 minutes, and I'm liking the visuals, but what's the plot is what's irritating me on all three viewings of the movie. Jessica takes Paul to Bene Gesserit? I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I know it's a series of 7 books, as the sister to test him as he puts his right hand in a box, as he feels pain and fear as she sees images from Paul's dreams and sees bad things happen around him. And Paul tells her he dreams of a girl that happens to be Shawnee, and she brings Jessica in as failed the test, and the score by Hans Zimmer is very thrilling. And remember, the reason that I don't get the story is because it's based on 7 books by Frank Herbert. So, well, let's just judge the movie as it is from this point on. The ships go out of the water to Arrakis, while Paul waits a few weeks to get there when he would rather go with Duncan, and the space scene is breathtaking. And we get to Arrakis and with the Atreides family, as the images of the desert are also breathtaking as they meet, and with not just Duncan, but Thufir. I don't know if I'm saying that right, as the family does with Gurney. And I do really like the characters and the shots and images and are amazing. But my problem for this entire 2.5 hour movie is, what is the story? Despite it's half of the first book, from what I was told. Because remember, this is one half of the first book. Duke and Gurney learn some things about Arrakis while Jessica is interviewing a maid, as she has a weapon to give to Jessica called the crisp knife as a gift while keeping her alive. Meanwhile, Paul sees someone watering the trees as they're sacred trees, as the script is well spoken by the actors. Meanwhile, Paul watches images of trees and sees a type of bug that almost attacks him as he catches it, with Thufir wanting to resign, but Duke wants to hunt down who attacked his son, which is a scary scene, sure. Beanie meets with Baron, giving her his word he won't harm the Atreides family, as he'll capture Duke later in the film, spoiler alert. But Stellan Skarsgård pulls off evil very well, as I'm impressed with his performance. The Atreides family and Gurney and meet Duncan at a ship that I thought was a bug when I first saw the film, as he tells them the Arrakis people fight like demons. As Stilgar, played by Javier Bardem, enters to give the crisp knife for a trade to go back to where they came from. But Duke can't promise that, as he recognizes Paul and Gurney doesn't like him, which reminded me of Josh Brolin's character, not only not liking Javier Bardem's character in No Country for Old Men. They fly with Dr. Liet Kynes into the desert, and some of the contacts on not only on her eyes, but with the Arrakis eyes, but being blue, which is so pretty, just like the shot of when they're flying in the middle of the desert and see a giant worm with a giant mouth. And when they see it, the special effects are amazing. They land the ship as it gets attacked by a worm, and Paul helps out Gurney as he checks the sands, which happens to be called spice in this movie, and leads the men back to the ship. And after he hears the sand, or what's it called? Spice, Paul just sits there until Gurney picks up Paul and takes him out of there and back to the ship. And when Paul and Gurney fly away to see the worm eating the ship, that's a great shot, as the IMAX expanded it. Very well done. They get to the base, or they get back to base, and Dr. Wellington Yu helps Paul get briefly cured as he dreams again about Shani, as he dreams of getting killed by her, which is a very scary but yet a disturbing image. But back with the bad guys, we get a robot-sounded man as we see the Polka Dot Man from the Suicide Squad in a brief scene with the bad guys before going to war, which is pretty good looking scene. Duke asks Jessica as a witch if she can protect Paul, as Duke feels he may die sometime soon, which will happen in the next scene, spoiler alert, when Dr. Yu just betrays Duke, Gurney, and everyone, as Baron's men comes and attacks everyone, including shooting Duke in the back, and the shields have come down and they explode the ships, so nobody escapes, while Dr. Yu makes a bargain for Duke to his wife, and Paul and Jessica get captured with Duncan, attacking some bad guys and eventually catching up with Paul and Jessica with the ship that looks like a dragonfly, which is a cool looking ship, don't get me wrong. As Paul and Jessica forces the bad guys to let them go and kill the others, and they luckily get out of the ship and see the ashes from their campsite. Duke wakes up at Baron's table while stripped naked, but we don't see his privates because remember, this is a PG-13 movie, so they playing that scene pretty safe. As Baron tells Dr. Yu he set her free by killing her off screen, he kills Dr. Yu and tells Duke his bloodline is gone forever, and suddenly Duke breathes a deadly breath as it kills everyone, which confused me, like, is Duke dead and is Baron dead? Or what happened to Gurney and Thufir? I was completely confused. Maybe the next movies will probably tell us. I'm not sure. Duncan looks for Paul and Jessica with Dr. Keynes, while Paul imagines himself fighting a war with the Arrakis people and shows his blue eyes, which is another great shot, and imagines himself with the Arrakis people while having a meltdown with Jessica about how much he's a freak and feels Duke's death, and they hear something is coming, and as it turns out, it's Duncan. And I thought, hallelujah. I'm having a hard time with the story here, and if you think there's a story, don't expect too much, except fantastically great shots for this entire movie. Duncan takes Paul and Jessica to a hidden place while a storm comes in as we move on to the next day, as Paul has an argument with Dr. Keynes as he's seen her dreams, while the guards get attacked by Baron's men, and Paul and Jessica sense it as well as Duncan, and he fights the bad guys and locks the door between them and Duncan, getting himself killed by the bad guys, which was a little sad, sure, but luckily he didn't say, "My man," in this whole movie, although he did say "my boy" in a couple of times during the movie. But back to the movie. Paul and Jessica escaped with the Dragonfly ship, but Dr. Keynes is stabbed while calling a worm to attack the bad guys, which was kind of a good idea as Paul and Jessica's ship gets shot down and they crash into the sands. You get what I mean, but yeah. Beast tells Baron that Paul and Jessica will never survive such a storm as they're dead, and after Paul and Jessica crash landing the ship, they run out and away from the ship and head towards the rocks as the worms won't get them from there, and change clothes into something they can breathe in while in the middle of the dunes and walk to wherever someone can help them. And on my third viewing, I've grown to appreciate the movie for the visuals, as it feels director Denis Villeneuve has an imagination and a vision on how this movie will look at the end of the day. A worm almost attacks Paul and Jessica as they get to the rocks and get away from the worm, and as they're on the rocks, Paul realizes they're not alone, and some Arrakis warriors, including Stilgar, appear as they'll take Paul but not Jessica, because she cannot be trained, as Paul almost kills them all, but gets encountered by Shuri, as they'll join Paul is challenged by one of them, Jameis, which is his name, challenges him to the death, and they do fight to the death as Paul wins and Jameis dies, and they take both Paul and Jessica to their home, as the climax is storyless. But I said when the credits rolled the third time out loud, this movie is a masterpiece, and I'm very much looking forward to part 2 of the story, as it is hard. It's a hard book to adapt, meaning adaptation, that kind of a thing, or adapt into a feature-length film. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 9.0 out of 10. The visuals were absolutely gorgeous, as this movie has kind of a story, but not as much so don't expect a story. Just expect visuals and good acting. And if you read the book, expect that this is only half of the story. The acting was pretty good, as this movie should not only win the best cinematography at the Oscars, but the best score by Hans Zimmer, as the score to this is absolutely epic. After watching this movie 3 times, I've grown to appreciate the movie as it is, and director Denis Villeneuve has an imagination and a vision on how this movie will look at the end of the day, as this is a masterpiece. I'm very much looking forward to the next half of the book being told by Denis Villeneuve, as like The Lord of the Rings, this is a hard book to adapt without making multiple movies as parts of the book. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and until we get to Dune Part 2, smile, Gurney. I am smiling.